Woven into the very fabric of India is this incredible story of love, unity, and service. It's not a story of kings and conquest, but of saints and seekers who brought a message not with swords, but with poetry and music. Today, we're going to trace that story, what's called the golden chain of Sufi mystics. So, how'd they do it? Really, how did this spiritual current travel thousands of miles to completely transform the hearts and minds of millions? Well, that's the journey we're about to go on.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at how Sufism even got to India. Then, we'll meet the founder of its most influential order, a guy named Moinuddin Chisti. From there, we'll follow this golden chain of his successors, see how the order spread south, and then, finally, we'll zoom out and look at some other important Sufi orders too.
Okay, so let's set the stage. We're talking about a time long before many of the great empires we know today. A totally different kind of influence was taking root in India, one that wasn't about worldly power, but about a deep, personal connection to the divine. So what even is Sufism? Well, at its heart, Sufism is the mystical side of Islam. It's less focused on the external rules and rituals, and much more about seeking a direct, personal experience with God. It's a path that's really fueled by love, by devotion, and this core belief that you find the ultimate truth by looking inward.
And the person who brought the most enduring Sufi tradition to India, well, he was a man from Iran who would become one of the most revered saints in all of South Asian history.
Moinuddin Chisti arrived in a place called Ajmer and set up his center. But he wasn't there for conquest, he was there to serve. He quickly earned the title Garib Nawaz, which means benefactor of the poor, because he dedicated his entire life to helping the most vulnerable people. His core teaching was something called Wadat al-Wujud, this really radical idea that all of existence is actually a single reality, a manifestation of the divine. And this powerful idea of unity, it became the cornerstone for the entire Chishti order.
This brings us to the heart of our story, the silsila, or the chain of succession. See, Moinuddin Chisti didn't just establish a philosophy. He passed his spiritual authority, his light, to a chosen disciple, who then passed it to his, creating this unbroken lineage that we now call the golden chain. It's like passing a torch.
So, the first link in this chain, right after the founder, was his top disciple. And this is the guy who would carry the Chishti message from Ajmer right into the seat of power, Delhi.
Qutubuddin Bakhtiyar Kaki was a huge deal. He's the one who really cemented the Chishti order in Delhi. And he did it using a pretty revolutionary tool, sama, or devotional music. Now, for some, this was controversial, but Kaki saw music as a direct line to spiritual ecstasy. His influence grew so massive that the Sultan himself actually named the iconic Qutub Minar in his honor.
The next link in the chain was Kaki's disciple, a man who would take the message out of the capital city and deep into the heartland of Punjab. And he didn't just communicate as a saint, he communicated as a poet.
Baba Farid is just a towering figure. He's considered the first major poet of the Punjabi language. Think about the impact of that. His verses were so universal, so full of wisdom, that they were later included in the Guru Granth Sahib, the holy scripture of Sikhism. That's an incredible act of interfaith respect. He also made a point to live as a householder, with a family, not as a monk hiding away. He was showing everyone that a deep spiritual life was accessible to all, not just a few.
And all of this really came from his core belief, which he captured in this simple but incredibly powerful quote: "Hunger is the source of all evil." For him, spirituality wasn't some abstract thing up in the clouds. It was rooted in real empathy and service to people who were suffering.
From Baba Farid, that spiritual torch was passed to maybe the most famous Chishti saint of them all, Nizamuddin Auliya, a man who would basically become the spiritual heartbeat of Delhi for decades.
Nizamuddin Auliya's influence was just immense. Here in the title Mahbub-e-Ilahi, the beloved of God. He lived through the reigns of 7 different sultans, but here's the kicker. He famously never once visited any of their courts. That was a huge statement. He was saying his spiritual authority came from the people, not from worldly power. And he connected with those people by preaching in their local language, Hindavi, and by showing this incredible openness, even bringing yogic breathing into his practices. He was truly a mirror of India, reflecting its diverse spiritual soul.
Now, after Nizamuddin and his successor, the centralized power of the order in Delhi started to fade a bit. But this wasn't the end of the story. Nope, it was a new beginning, because now the message was about to travel.
You can really see the journey over the centuries here.
What kicks off in Rajasthan with Moinuddin Chisti, moves to the capital with Kaki, spreads through Punjab with Baba Farid, and then, in the late 14th century, it makes this huge leap south, down into the Deccan Plateau.
And the man who carried that torch south was Banda Nawaz. He was fleeing some political turmoil in Delhi, and he settled in a place called Gulbarga, and he just followed the Chishti playbook he adapted. Just like Nizamuddin used the local language Hindui, Banda Nawaz became the first Sufi to write extensively in Dakhini, the local language of the Deccan. This made sure the message of love and unity didn't get lost in translation. It reached a whole new population.
Of course, the Chishtis, as influential as they weren't the only game in town. The subcontinent was this amazing, diverse landscape of mystical thought, with different orders following some very different paths.
I mean, take the Suhrawardi order. They were almost the complete opposite of the Chishtis. Where the Chishtis embraced poverty and stayed away from politics, the Suhrawardis accepted wealth and actively worked with the state, taking official titles. And while the Chishtis famously used music to connect with the divine, the Suhrawardis were much more orthodox and conservative. It just goes to show you how diverse Sufism really was.
And there were other orders too, like the Qadiri order, which, wow, gives us one of the most beautiful stories of interfaith harmony in all of Indian history.
This is a truly remarkable story. The fifth Sikh Guru, Guru Arjan Dev, held the Qadiri Sufi saint Mian Mir in such high esteem, they were close friends, that he asked him to do something historic, to lay the foundation stone of the most sacred shrine in Sikhism, the Harmandir Sahib, which we all now know as the Golden Temple. It's just such a powerful testament to the deep spiritual bonds that could cut right across religious labels.
And that really brings us to a final thought. We've traced this golden chain through the centuries, and we've seen how these mystics consistently chose a universal message of love over rigid rules. They used local languages, they valued service more than power, and they built bridges of understanding. So, in our own often divided world, what can we learn from their legacy?